You're listening to the Marginally Geeky Show, the epically geeky book club.
Greetings and welcome to the Marginally Geeky Show. I'm your host for the evening, Eugene Stevens. Tonight I'm joined by Jennifer Hetzel and Chris Andrew. How are y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Busy. It's end of the school year, so I'm trying to get stuff wrapped up at my campus. But and then of course website stuff and all that other good stuff. So, and then helping plan Geek Fest, and we actually have a Geek Fest preview event this weekend. So trying to get planned for that and just tons of stuff. So, life, all over the life. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's go ahead and jump on into our book. Our book this month was, I believe, Jennifer, you're the one that said we should go with this one, recommended it, and not that it's not pertinent to current times or anything, but this month's
because
book...
reasons.
Exactly. This month's book was 1984, written by George Orwell. Before the show actually started, right as we were picking up the stream, we were actually talking about this has been, all three of us, this is our first read-through of the book. We're pretty sure it used to be a staple in, probably, I would assume either... maybe college, but I would probably high school reading, and none of us read it during those time periods. Going back, just before we get into the book, just looking at it, I can see why there are individuals that would not want this book read in public school, just because it might give people ideas. But I also live in the Bible Belt, so that being said. Let's go ahead and get started with it. We'll go ahead and start with our first impressions of the book. But anyone like to go first? All right.
I'll go.
All right, Chris, what were your first impressions?
So, just full disclosure, I haven't finished it yet.
Okay.
I'm on the beginning parts of, the first chapter of part 3. I like you. People read it in high school. Ray read it in high school, and I never did. And I had friends who read it, and I knew it was a dystopian about 1984. I had no idea it was written in 1949.
Yeah.
So knowing that, it was hard to get into. It's really dry because it's like monotone because it's just Winston, and his life is it's drudgery. So it was really, he hates his life, and so that was kind of reflected in the first little bit of it.
I kind of hate his life.
I hate his life,
yeah.
too.
It's pretty awful.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that this book was written in the 40s and has gotten so much, at least kind of on the technology side, right, even up to this point, is kind of scary. Of course, it hasn't been implemented quite as, he... foretold in the book, but the fact that he saw these giant screens that almost in this case take up the entire wall, but nowadays we have them that almost take up an entire wall. I mean, televisions have gotten huge,
Yeah,
and they have their cameras built in, so they're actually 2-way and everything else. I mean, it's he kind of hit that one really close to home. Pardon me, I got a cough that just won't go away. The book to me was, I'm going to compare this to something else. I've heard people talk about how they've never seen Star Wars, but they know everything in Star Wars because there are so many tropes that have come out of Star Wars. There's so many things in science fiction, well, just in flat out storytelling nowadays that come directly from Star Wars. So even though you may not have seen it, you know where it comes from. And I found that kind of to be the way with this book. Nothing of it, nothing was like groundbreaking, but there were several times when I looked at the book and I went, that's where that came from. That's where this meme that I've seen, come up over and over again, especially in other dystopian type stories. This is where they can kind of find this was the genesis. This was the square one. So, I kind of got that feeling, and I didn't really understand that thought process when I first heard it about Star Wars. Now that I've read this, I understand it. I can like, yep, I probably didn't really have to read the book to know everything, almost everything in it. Like I knew bits and pieces from all these different parts in the book, and reading it just kind of cemented it and gave it a cohesive story. But yeah, so because the big screen, Big Brother's watching you. That's that is a term that's been used forever and a day. About government oversight, and then I knew about the big screen walls and so on and so forth. So, let's go ahead and get into the actual story itself. And I'll go ahead and confess this: I did not actually take a lot of notes on this one. I'm actually using other notes online to kind of go with. So. Which is why when we get to the end of the show and talk about other books that we've read, I actually have other books that I've read. So, because I didn't have to listen for 15 minutes, stop, take notes, listen 15 minutes, stop, take notes. Okay, so anyway, the book takes place. Did they ever mention his last name? Because in these notes I'm seeing here, it says his name was Winston Smith. I just thought he was named Winston. Okay, I just remember his name Winston. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's a member of the Outer Party, and his job is really interesting. His job is basically, as these commands come down from the higher ups in his job, as it were, he's supposed to go through along with the rest of his team and rewrite history. Like literally, they have to go through and obliterate stuff and change facts and change numbers and everything else, and after once they get the information, it's written in this weird, what do they call it? Newspeak, I think is what they refer to it.
Yeah.
I took it kind of like shorthand. They immediately had to throw it into, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's literally like a hole, and it leads to a fire, and that's where you throw stuff, and that's just where it goes.
The memory hole.
Yes, the memory hole. That's right. So he works in the records department in the Ministry of Truth, which he talks about that later. There are several ministries, and their titles are actually just the opposite of what they do there, essentially. But he goes through and he's doing this. But the book really starts. It picks up. He gets home. He has to help one of his next door neighbors, and he goes in, and his living room is just there on one wall. It's just this giant screen, and it's got a camera in it, and pretty much everyone lives that way. Everyone lives with quote unquote Big Brother, the government, watching over them at any given time. But he's got a little nook that's kind of carved out where the screen can't see him, and he manages to get a hold of a blank book, and he decides he's going to start a journal, which by itself, as he says in the book, is punishable by death. And it doesn't mince words. It is very clear that in this future, free thought is like outlawed. Like, you are not allowed to have your own thoughts. You are supposed to believe what you're told. You're supposed to love Big Brother. You're supposed to go along with everything that everyone else goes with. And if you're caught for thought crimes, as they're put, there are severe punishments, to the point that they even mentioned his next door neighbor that he helped out. I can't remember what the name of the league was, but they start recruiting children very young and basically inundating them with all of these policies and get them to turn on their parents.
The spies?
I don't remember what it was called.
They're called spies.
That's basically what they are. And they're spies. They're spies for the government to turn their parents in for thought crimes or anything else that they're not supposed to be doing. So he starts this diary, and he talks about how one of the first things he writes down is that he hates Big Brother, and Big Brother must die. And he finds it very liberating. He already knows at this point, just having the thoughts would be punishable by death. The fact that he put it down on paper and there is proof of it now pretty much just seals his fate. And at this point, he kind of almost said, he's like, I already don't expect to live much longer than this. I know it's just going to be any time now. I'm going to get caught. In fact, he gets interrupted by his neighbor again and realizes he's left the book or the journal wide open sitting on a table. And he's like, if anyone had walked by, if she had just glanced over and seen anything on that, I'd be dead. I'd be a dead man. So, so thoughts on that thus far? Like, I mean, talk about oppression of oppression.
Yeah, so the whole rewriting the news every day is just such a daunting task to me.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even begin to do that? I mean, in 1940 something, I guess it was conceivable because they didn't have the internet. But today, it wouldn't be possible in that same way. I don't know. It's just, and it's so scary to think, like, they're creating history. They're telling people what happened, people that didn't exist, or, places that didn't. I don't know. It's just really scary to think about and depressing.
Yeah, well, it sort of already happens because history is written by the victors. It's not written by the people who suffered and lost. So you already have that, and it's just exhausting what he does. And he when he thinks about it, he's like, I remember when things were different. I remember when this wasn't true, and now all of a sudden it's true now, and everybody's going to believe it, even though it's full of shit. And that part was really fascinating to me. The whole constant rewrite of history so that the party was always right, no matter what. Even if it was something so little like shoes, it didn't matter. As long as the party was right about it, that was the point.
Yeah. So
it didn't matter that it was wrong 2 weeks ago. As long as it's right now, then that's what counts. And it would just, and the whole, that's later on, the hate week thing. And
well, there's the lead up to it because, we get to, and before we move to the 2 minutes of hate. They, the fact that, you're rewriting every single piece of paper, any type of proof. And it points this out, and unfortunately this is true. Human memory is garbage. Like, we're getting to the point where we're starting to realize that eyewitnesses for crimes are, even if they were standing right there, it's bullshit, because you don't remember what you think you remember. And can you imagine trying to go back and think about stuff that happened just even a few years ago if there was, this overwhelming mountain of proof that shows otherwise? And they talk about it. There's their country and there's two others, and basically they just switch wars from time to time. But if you ask anyone, they're like, "Oh no, we've always been at war with this one and friends with the other."
And he's
and he was alive when he wasn't.
Yeah, it's like it's only been 4 years, yet everybody thinks it's just been forever. No, I remember when it was East Asia or East Asia instead of Eurasia that's fighting now. And he's like, and he can't comprehend how nobody else remembers this. It's like he thinks he's the only one that is aware of them just constantly changing history, and nobody seems to want to mention that.
Yeah.
Well,
it would be speaking out against Big Brother.
Yeah, but because when he talks about his ex-wife, and how she just sort of accepted everything that Big Brother said to her and handed to her without question and without any, he just couldn't live together anymore with that, because he basically thought that she was an idiot for just swallowing everything that she got thrown.
Well, before we get started on the other stuff, let's just go ahead and touch on the wife part. He does mention technically he's still married because he's not granted a divorce, but he hasn't seen her in years. But he even mentions, he said one of the things in the book that it hammers on, not only are they getting children to turn on their parents by basically becoming spies of the government. But they are brainwashing everyone to basically take pleasure out of almost everything, to include sex, to the point that sex in the future is literally like it is for reproduction, and that is it. And he even mentions that is why he couldn't live with his wife anymore, because even though they couldn't seem to have a kid, she just insisted that every single week we're going to do this, and because it is our duty to the government. And he's like, I can't do that. I cannot do this. Because
she hated it. She couldn't stand him touching her. Like, it was horrific for her that she had to go through this, because now they have a society there called the Junior Anti-Sex League.
Yeah.
And these girls and women, young women, wear these red sashes like around their waist as a sign that I'm part of this party. And I think sex is just horrific.
They even celebrated like the lower birth rate at one point in the book. They, at the end, they were like, we had a decrease in births, and I'm like, that's a good thing, because usually it's the opposite. You celebrate.
Yeah.
So sick, everything.
Yeah. So we get to the mandatory 2 minutes of hate, where basically everyone is in front of the screen, and they project pictures of the enemy at the time, and you're literally just supposed to focus all of your hatred and like yell and everything else. And he mentions, he's like, some of these people he thinks maybe are overdoing it. Some of these people he's like, I know they believe everything. They believe this 100%. But he talks about how you get, even though he doesn't necessarily believe it, you just get, caught up in it, because it's such, it's that whole mob mentality thing going on. So during one of the 2 minutes of hate, he catches the eye of two different people. The first one he gets the eye of is someone he calls O'Brien. O'Brien's part of the inner party, and he's not sure why, but he just has this feeling in the gut of his stomach that maybe O'Brien kind of feels like this is bullshit as well. He doesn't have any reason to believe that. There's just something about the way he acts, the way he looks. He just has this feeling. The other person he catches the eye of is a young woman who's younger than him, has dark hair, and he's completely convinced that she's there. She's a spy, and she's there to like catch him. Like, that's the purpose. But then and her name's Julia, which he finds out later, because they bump into each other in a hallway, and she drops a note or puts a note in his hand. And when he reads it, it just says, "I love you." And it's just like, what? Where the hell is this coming from? So they work out this elaborate way to kind of keep bumping into each other. In some cases, like almost right in front of a screen. Most of the time they're trying to get away from a telescreen, whether it be at, the lunch counter or whatever, because she works in the same building he does, just on a different level. And they do finally get to schedule a time where they can get together and meet. And she just flat out says, I don't know why she says I love you, but okay. But then they meet up and like literally just like go at it. Like they're out in the middle of some kind of not a forest, but
the woods.
Yeah, it was kind of the woods,
Yeah.
kind of like a garden, but yeah, it was definitely far enough away. Like, it's to the point that he's like, we were far enough away from the tree line in case there were trees that were bugged with mics, and I'm just like, damn. But they have sex, and like he's like, I didn't know it could be like this, and then they start to fall in love, and they have to work. They have to work their time together very, very carefully. They have to make sure that they're not seen together very often, and so on and so forth. And he ends up procuring a little place where he bought some contraband stuff. Actually, the book that he got his hands on. And they end up getting this little kind of above a shop or whatever set up. And so again, mention the parts of the town that he's going to, that they're going to for their rendezvous. I don't remember what the name of the people were, but the people were actually, they were considered the lowest class.
Trolls.
Yes.
Trolls.
Yes.
Yeah, trolls.
And they're lower class. They're considered lower class, lower intellect, lower everything, but they're definitely freer by all means. Like, they actually have sex for, recreation, and they enjoy life. And even though they don't have much to drink, they drink and they have fun, and they actually have some free thought. Not a lot, but they have some free thought. Which was,
and they're not monitored 24/7.
Exactly. Yeah. Because that was one of the reasons why they got the place, was because he was pretty sure there was no telescreen there.
Yeah.
So, so they start getting together, and they know pretty much there's no way they could ever be together, and it's just a further indictment from him that, this is not going to last. We're going to get caught. It's either a question of weeks, maybe months, but we're going to get caught, and shit's not going to happen. Shit's not going to go well for us. Let me see. I'm checking the notes or whatever. And at one point, they talk back and forth a little bit, and she tells him, you're not my first. I do this a lot. I purposely am doing things. On the outside, I look like I'm following in with everything, but she's trying to do everything she can to disobey Big Brother.
She basically says I'm a big whore.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure was
He's
one
very
of the...
But he likes that.
Exactly.
He's turned on by that.
She's a traitor from the waist down, or something like that, is what he calls her. And she thinks it's the greatest compliment ever. Yeah, she throws herself at him and thinks it's fantastic and giggles, and yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. I was like, okay, because when we get to the end here and we start talking about the themes and everything, this is, we'll play into all this. So, because this is one of those books that, okay, I never enjoyed The Great Gatsby. Had to read it, didn't care for it, mainly because I had to pick it apart for all of the, every color that was in the book represented something. It was way above my head at that time. This book is very, very clear and plain as to the themes that it's sewing into it, which I enjoyed, because you can hand it to anyone, and anyone's going to pick up on these themes. So, but he ends up talking to her and convinces her that we should go to O'Brien. I think O'Brien is part of the party, and the party is an anti-Big Brother secret establishment. The Resistance. That's right. Yeah. And they're aimed for bringing down Big Brother. So they go to O'Brien, and O'Brien basically welcomes them with open arms. She's like, "Yes, I am part of the Brotherhood, if you are going to be part of this, we need to ask some questions and figure it out. Like, are you willing to die for this cause?" And they both say yes. They're willing to die for this cause. They're willing to give their life. They're willing to, as he said, do certain things, never ask a question, and there may be a case where
we do some fucked up shit.
Yeah, and we're just going to leave you hanging. Like, when you get caught, if we tell you to go blow up a school and you get caught, there's not going to be any help. Like, the most help we will give you is we will try to sneak a razor blade in so you can, kill yourself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, not the greatest bode for, an establishment you want to join, but okay. So at a anti-war rally. Now, this was interesting. This goes back to the thing. So they're it's the week of hate, right? Yeah, the week of hate. So this is the extended, not just the 2 minutes. You get a whole week now. As he is in this week of hate, it is a demonstration against their current enemy. And as the guy is up on stage reading off, the script as to, why we hate them and so on and so forth, they literally change who they are fighting. They literally switch from one country to the other. And it talks about how banners are literally being ripped down off of walls and immediately replaced with the banners of their new enemy. And no one bats an eye. Like, everyone just goes right along with it. Like, literally, he said in the middle of a sentence, he used Eurasia, and then changed it to whatever the other one was. And it's just, and no one questioned it. It was just, yep, that's who we're at war with. That's who we've always been at war with. So,
yeah.
But
and then they spend.
Blows my mind that people would just be able to go along with that so seamlessly.
Yeah, and then they spend the whole next week rewriting everything again, saying it was East Asia we've always been fighting and not Eurasia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the rally, he's handed a copy of the book, and it's the Underground Treasonous volume written by Goldstein. And Goldstein is supposed to be a former Big Brother supporter who has turned and is founded the Brotherhood as part of the resistance. And it's at this point he starts talking about how he got a piece of proof that he could have used. He didn't keep it because, of course, he just immediately destroyed it in the memory hole. But it was a picture of Goldstein and someone else years after they were reportedly killed. And, he keeps wondering about that. He's like, I had proof, I don't think I would have destroyed it, had I gotten it now or whatever. He's like, but I had proof that, that they are lying to us. But he reads the book. Him and Julia go to their little cottage area, and they've had sex, and she's kind of like wandering in and out of consciousness, and he's reading the book to her, and it goes through. Pardon me, and starts explaining stuff, and it starts explaining how there is no real war. The war is self-sustained, and it's just fighting over like a little bit of ground every year, back and forth, and everything is a ruse. There's no real war. We just switch out every so often to, depending on how things are going, but there's no way that any of these three countries can take the other. So they're in a constant state of, never getting anywhere, but they've all figured out the same thing. And they've all figured out that by having a perpetual war, you can keep people in line. You can keep people essentially, mental slaves forever because they'll never question it. And he talks about how, the problems if with peace is that, you don't have a lot of production and so on and so forth, but with a constant war, people are, they have a goal that they're working to. They're working towards, supporting the war effort, even though it doesn't go anywhere. And then they keep constantly changing these numbers that they're coming up with on like the number of shoes that are made and so on and so forth. And it explains why those numbers have to be changed, because these shoes are, in some cases, they may actually be going towards the war effort. In other cases, they may just be like burning them. Like there's no record. It's just that people are making shoes for the war, and those shoes may actually go to something. They may not. It's just to keep people working, keep people busy, keep people not thinking, which is scary
to justify
as shit.
Using all these resources and yeah.
That was that part. I got through most of that chunk. That part was really hard to read because there was very little break. Like there was one chunk, it went on for like 10 pages. And I'm like, I can't read Goldstein anymore because it was very, very dry. It was like reading a textbook. It made the first part of the book make a lot more sense. But it was really scary because I'm like, this is really well thought out. And I bet somebody in the real world has already thought of this, and that's sort of their goal. And that's scary because it made sense to me. It was like, human nature is set up for this. So if you create this sort of society, it would work. That would work. Yeah. And that's freaky.
We'll get to there in a second. But he also mentions things like the fact that, the chocolate rations may actually be going down. But they report it as, they went up from 8 to 10 when they actually went down from 12 to 10. But once again, because there's no proof and people just accept everything that they're told, they're like, hey, we're getting more chocolate, even though they're not. So.
Yeah.
So he takes it, he reads it, he's reading it to her. She's kind of, in and out of consciousness. And then they both pass out. They wake up at some time later. They're not exactly sure how late it is. And there's a noise from behind a painting, in the room that they never thought to check, and they check it, and there's a telescreen there. And it basically says, stay right where you are, and they're, stormtroopers storm in. They arrest him, they arrest her, they take him away, take her away. And he's trying, he's like, okay, I'm going to be, I've got to be as strong as I can. And the notes that I'm reading here says, it actually says days and months. But I never got, and I'm sure that was part of the torture, was the fact that time passes and you have no idea how much time has passed. Like, he could have been in that first cell for days. He could have been in that first cell for weeks. He could have been in that first cell for months. Because, and that's something I skipped over. That's one of the other things it talks about is if you are suspect of committing thought crime, they disappear you is the term they use. They disappear you. So no one will remember you're there. Like, all records of you will be wiped off, off of everything. There's no record of you ever being there, to the point that people
You're an unperson.
You're an unperson, yeah. That people who knew you will literally forget you even existed. Mm-hmm. So he's in this room, and they basically are just torturing him. They're breaking him down. They're leaving him in there for long periods of time by himself. Occasionally someone else comes in, and then they leave or whatever. And he meets back up with O'Brien, and he thinks at first that O'Brien's been caught as well. And it turns out that, no, O'Brien has actually been monitoring him, I think he says at one point, for 7 years. And so, which, to kind of go back, he completely had him pegged wrong. He thought Julia was the spy, and O'Brien was, the friend, and it turned out to be completely opposite. But yeah, so O'Brien tells him that, the party is, they're aware of everything that he's done. I'm sure his wife has something to do with it. And, like I said, Winston, O'Brien's been watching him for years. They spend months torturing him. And he explains that whereas they're like, he says, well, why don't you just kill me? And he said, well, we can't do that. The reason why if we just kill you, then you become a martyr. And we can't have that because martyrs start resistance. And, that's just, it's correcting it's not correcting the problem. And the problem is you don't love Big Brother. So we have to correct that. We have to make you love Big Brother. So that's literally what they spend time doing, is they're doing everything they can to destroy his consciousness. And it goes into this part, and I'm sorry, I had there was a scene in there that was very much Star Trek The Next Generation, when Patrick Stewart is being tortured, where he's telling him, they're trying to instill what they call doublethink, where you can hold two opposing ideas in your mind, but to believe them to both be true. And they break it down to something as simple as 2 + 2 is 4. He's like, 2 + 2 is 4. No, 2 + 2 is 5, Winston. And he's like, no, it's 4. And of course, every time he says it, he gets tortured even more, to the point that he does start to question, is 2 + 2 5 in some cases. And that's where, the breakdown starts. He has some better times. It seems like, the therapy is working. Then he has relapses where he'll say something that he shouldn't say. So they kind of throw him back into, everything that's there. And all this is going on in the Ministry of Love. That's going back to that first thing about, he works in the Ministry of Truth where they create nothing but lies. He's in the Ministry of Love where they're basically, torturing people. And, they think they've pretty much got him broken down to, his core. And he's like, you're still not getting it. You're still not there. And, we've got to, just completely ruin you at this point. So they take him to what the dreaded Room 101. And Room 101 is where they make you face your greatest fear. And his greatest fear, and I don't remember, did he mention anywhere else in the book earlier about his greatest fear being rats?
No,
I don't see
but
I thought that was kind of out of left field.
He did react when they were in the room, and he was like, it might be rats or something, and she went after him. But I don't remember thinking, he has a phobia of rats or something.
Yeah,
I didn't either. So that was kind of out of left field for me.
Yeah. Okay.
But so they strap him down. And O'Brien puts this cage that has these two like starving rats, in it over his face, and is basically just giving him an ultimatum that, if, tell me what I need to hear. And of course he won't tell him what it is. He's guessing as to what it is. He's like, or I'm going to open this cage and I'm going to let these rats, eat your face. And the second before he, opens the trap, he says, do it to Julia. Just don't do it to me. Do it to her. And at that point, he's broken. He's given up the last of his humanity. He doesn't care about anyone else. He's just trying to save himself.
'Cause up until then, he had never really truly turned on her. Like, he had admitted that they did things and, quote unquote, like, confessed and turned her in, but he had never really, like, betrayed her, as he said.
Mm-hmm. And that was the final straw. And at that point, he quote unquote starts to go through his final healing. So even though he's been a complete traitor, he's been all about, trying to bring down Big Brother in the best way that he can think of. He's changed. And the last chapter or two of the book is him sitting in a little cafe and watching the telescreen and just thinking about, what's happening in the war or whatever, what's going on or whatever, and how much he oh, that's right, he meets Julia again, but she's changed too, and he admits that he gave her up, and she admits the same thing, and he's like, she's not attractive to me anymore, and she seems much older, and I don't know what she went through. I don't know what her biggest fear was, but obviously they did the same thing to her. And he keeps mentioning, he's like, I expect at any time, at any day, who knows, it may be here, it may be in my house, it may be, in the street or whatever, someone's just going to come up and kill me because they won, because I love Big Brother. Big Brother's it. And that's where the book ends.
I don't understand that at all. Like, how he went from resisting his whole life, hating him, and then suddenly he's fine. He loves him, and like, what?
I think
what the
that's
hell?
Just. I mean, I could. Well, I haven't looked too much into the psychology of brainwashing, but I wouldn't put it past someone to be able to completely turn someone around like that. So, but let's talk about some of the big themes here. Of course, the biggest one that stands out for everyone is government oversight, government watching. We don't have a lot of like. I mean, we have traffic cameras, we have stuff like that, but it's not like in England where they've voluntarily, put up cameras. Closed circuit cameras pretty much everywhere on all the streets. So essentially you are being watched all the time in Britain. The thing is I don't see that, and I don't know, maybe that's the problem, is I don't see that as being a problem. In fact, we're kind of having the opposite thing here in the United States right now with police officers and, the debate as to whether or not they should have to wear a camera at all time. And it, for the most part, not to get too political, I personally believe, sure, it protects them. It protects, the people they're dealing with. So I understand where from, the scary, government's watching issue, having cameras everywhere would be a bad thing. But it's one of those things that's like, I see where you were coming from, but I think we've, in some cases, implemented it where it wasn't such a bad thing. Like, there was actually some positives as to why we did it. So, any comments on that one?
Yeah, no, I think sometimes it's that fine line, eh? Like, you want to be protected and you want to be safe. So knowing it being videoed and having people in on it for some parts of your life, it makes sense. And then you've got that other part where you're like, oh yeah, but you're not allowed to see any of this. So it's kind of, where is it all or nothing? Is it, it's the movie The Circle from Tom Hanks was in it. It's a new one. And I think the tagline of that is, people are better when they're watched all the time. Right. Like you're a better person when you know somebody else is watching, right? Like it's supposed to bring out the best in you. Because if you're going to get caught, they have it on tape. Like, look, you were being douche or you were breaking the law. We have it right here. Mm-hmm. So that was the philosophy behind that. So I understand that too, but it's like, I don't want cameras in my house. I don't want the two-way camera where they can see everything in my home. But on the street, I want them to catch the guy who caught me off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Accident happened. There's proof. Oh no, it really was your fault, or it was my fault, or whatever. So it's like a tricky fine line.
Yeah, there's still got to be privacy, personal space. There's definitely benefits to having some kind of supervision, like you said, but we're still, entitled to a certain amount of freedom in certain spaces. And
for sure.
I'm glad you brought up that movie, The Circle, because it ties into the thing I was going to bring up, the fact that this is even though he really pegged the whole TVs watching this thing, there's no way he could have seen social media. I can only imagine what his thought on social media would be, in that people are constantly telling people, broadcasting out to the entire world, what it is they're doing and interested in, and
voluntarily giving up their information.
Yeah.
He probably would have thought that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I only give up the information that I want to give up. And let's be honest, I mean, who's probably tracking me more? The government or advertisers? And it's advertisers.
Yeah.
It's advertisers. Okay, so the worst possible outcome here is that, at least right now, is that you figure out, hey, Eugene's talked about buying a Nintendo Switch. We're going to flood everything he does with a Nintendo Switch commercial. Yeah. Right now, that would be the worst outcome. Now, I've heard people talk about the ideas that, insurance companies getting a hold of this information and being like, oh, hey, look, we've got your frequent, buyer record or whatever from Target, and we see that week after week you buy beer, and, that probably means you're, a little more at risk for, certain types of, heart disease or being overweight or something like that. So maybe we'll increase your premiums a little bit. That's a little far-fetched. I could see it possibly being.
But there's still a fine line with that stuff, because you get into legal troubles just talking about if you use social media when you're hiring somebody. Mm-hmm. Those people can sue you, for infringing on their privacy. And so, yeah, people can do that, but whether it's upheld, and still legal, is the thing that is kind of up in the air.
People get fired for tweets and for Facebook posts that are insensitive or inflammatory, and so company can look on your Facebook page, which is basically like your resume now, and go through and decide whether they want you for their company or not. Mm-hmm. And if you've already there and they see some unsavory picture that they don't think reflects their business, they can fire you. And there's no laws based on discrimination from social media.
Not yet. I hope my hope in the future is, it's flipped. I hope it's to the point like where people are going into job, interviews, and they're like, well, you don't really have much of a presence online. You don't really seem to do any charity work or something like that. Why should I work for you as a business? Like, that's where I think it will hopefully eventually get to. But we'll see. We'll just have to see how that goes. So, as for the rewriting of history and the perpetual war, unfortunately, we do have a real world existence that's a case study that points that all of this can and would happen to some extent, and that's North Korea, because their leadership has told their people that they've invented everything, like, and it talked about that in the book. It's like, at a certain period of time, it's like, well, Big Brother invented, the air, the helicopter. And then he's like, I foresee it within a couple of years, and Big Brother would have also invented the airplane and invented fire, and yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, North Korea, I mean, is a scary example of this. Like you said, this is like someone figured it out, and almost like someone took it as a playbook and was like, hey, let's implement this and see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're very sequestered in their own country, and tour or people who come in who are foreigners, they have to get permission, and they're led around by a special liaison, and there's only certain places they can go, and if they take pictures, it has to be of this, and like it's all very staged, and it's all made to look from the outside, oh no, we're great, we're fine, everything's okay, and then when really they're all, a lot of their population is suffering and starving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing, the other thing that, and this is the biggest thing for the information part of it, and you already mentioned this, Jennifer. I still believe, if I were going to rank the 3 greatest things that mankind has ever created, would be probably fire, the printed word, immediately followed by the printing press, and then the internet. Because at this point, and this is why we've got to fight for, keeping the internet free and open as much as possible. With the internet, with the collection of information that we have, with the availability to spread information, that part could never happen. Like, there's no way you can. We all know this. I mean, politicians are figuring this out slowly but surely. You get caught with a bad picture, that's not going away. Like, it doesn't matter how much you scrub. It exists somewhere on the internet forever. Yeah. So, yeah, the idea of being able to scrub history like that is, I'm very happy for that. I'm very happy that, as long as we continue to protect it, of course. So,
yeah,
but then you do have, people or things that limit freedom of speech, and those things can get a little scary and kind of
true
lead back. And I mean, the thing that really, you may have this on your list, but that really shook me is the language, how they were developing their language to basically make it impossible to think anything negative about the government.
Oh yeah, and that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like censoring them by just how they can even think, That was. Did you guys read that whole section of the book where it talked about the development of the language, the appendix in the back? I
got through most of it. No, wait a minute. I think I did finish it. That was hard to do.
Yeah, that was really hard to read, but I managed to. I don't even think I got through all of it, but I got through most of it, and it was pretty fucked up.
But no, I mean you're right. That is a super scary thought, because that's some next level shit that I hadn't even thought about, is like literally limiting language to the point that people don't even know how to express, the idea that they might be having. Because it's like at some point there's no longer words for treason or for anything. It's just what, bad thought or something like that, or
ungood or
that's what it was, ungood. It's just all lumped in, so there's no way to, there's no way we could have a conversation about a specific thing. It would just be, we would run out of words and would not be able to express ourselves.
Yeah, the character Sime or Sim or something like that, who worked in the dictionary on the language, and he was just so happy and excited about all the words that they just canceled out, and how in the direction that this language is going to take, to the point where you were saying, where you will never be able to explain any or express anything bad or express anything unfavorable to the government, because there literally wouldn't be any words for it. And he was excited and couldn't wait for it to happen. And you have to get the new dictionary, and have you read this edition of it? And he just seemed really excited to just, and he had a big vocabulary, and just so excited to reduce people's words to to be able to have no thought, no individuality, and no creativity. It was all double good plus double good and all of that, which made no sense when you're reading it.
Oh yeah, it was.
Oh yeah,
ridiculous,
it's all
but,
gibberish.
Yeah,
Like double plus good, that makes no sense. You're just saying 3 words that are put together.
Well, final thoughts on the book. Did you enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Jennifer?
I enjoyed it insofar as it was an interesting story, but it was very depressing and scary because even though a lot of things obviously didn't turn out that way, there are a lot of things that are or could be going that way, and it's just scary to think about and kind of a warning, an omen, and it's telling how it still applies 50, 60 years later in certain situations. But
Chris, what did you think?
I'm liking it. It's hard to read because it's so
Dry,
dense, and it's very specific and very dry. But the ideas that this new government, like the government in the book have, are just so specific and so detailed, and even the littlest thing is important enough, even though it makes no difference in the grand scheme of things. It's important to get to get everything all done and for it all to be congruent. And, so I like it, especially with what's going on politically in the world, because you can make parallels, and some of it's a little scary and some of it's, most of it's scary.
Yeah.
But my thing is I love the past. I love history. So I'm really fascinated with the lengths that they go to change history. And my favorite quote is from a Canadian band. And it's from a song called Enid, and it's "Memory is a strange thing." Right? Like everybody's got, your memory can fail you. Your memory is different from my memory, even though we were there at the same time, and it changes over time. And so it makes sense that the government is able to do this because, like you said, you can't trust eyewitnesses anymore because their memory is, they can't remember it perfectly, and they're missing details, and the face is wrong, right? Like they're remembering details of the face wrong because the human brain is, faulty like that. But I'm liking it so far, and when I finish it, I will understand why it's even more depressing than it already is.
Yeah, it's depressing. I liked it in that, like, I think it is an important book. I definitely think, I don't want to say everyone should read it, but I would say anyone who has any interest in not just the current political climate, but any political climate, like, it's one of those things that, you want to, and honestly, I think it should definitely be read by high school / college students. Like that's like the key time to be like, hey, look, this guy foresaw this back in the 40s, like, and look how much of what he predicted is still applicable to today. And it's something you could sit down and have a detailed interesting conversation about. So but yeah, it is dry. If you haven't read it, just give it a shot. Go ahead and give it one run through. I'm not saying make it like your annual book you've got to go to every single year or anything like that. But
well, do that.
Oh, geez, can you imagine?
I will say one more thing that fascinated me was that they were insistent on turning them before they killed them. Like most times you hear about these people, these governments that are repressive, just trying to find everybody and get rid of them as quick as possible. But they're spending years, months, weeks, whatever, actually to turn them and make them, believers before they just kill them. Like,
yeah.
Why? I don't know. Just, it's crazy.
But yeah. There was some. Oh, Jesus! I just had a thought and I lost it. There was something else specifically about just the overall. That's what it was. The key things that they found were, to keep this this power, to keep everyone in check, was of course to limit free thought, to limit individuality, and of course to limit any progress. Like that was the other thing, was there was never any progress. Technology never moved forward. Science never moved forward. They were pretty much just like, yeah, we know we could probably go further than what we are at now, but it would just cause, disruption, and we can't have that. So we're just, things are never going to get better. They're probably going to continuously keep getting a little worse, maybe a little better, continuously get worse.
And O'Brien actually said that the sun revolved around the Earth. Everything revolves around the Earth. Like, they had moved that far backwards scientifically.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yep.
It just blew my mind. Like, what? Oh, we could totally move the stars if we wanted. We could turn them around, but they're just convenient. We could make things float. Like, what?
But you could see how if somebody started saying that, and because of this whole, phenomenon now where opinion equates fact. Well, I feel like this is true, so it's going to be true. Where somebody could start touting, well, that is true. We can do that. And then people actually starting to believe it. He says, and he's got proof. And so, yeah, it's a believable thing because people can be, if they're already starting to have doubts about what is fact. And if somebody gives them something alternative, it's like, no, that's true now.
Alternative facts.
Alternative fact.
And then, of course, it goes back to the whole thing. If there's no fact, if there's nothing you can point to.
Exactly. There's no proof that, this, then, how are you supposed to refute it? And that was his whole argument.
He's the crazy one.
Thing. Yeah, he's the crazy one, even though what he knows, it's the can't prove it because there's literally nothing for him to show anybody. Because they can be like, no, this book right here says that didn't happen. So how are you right?
Here, you want to know two scary things real quick before we move on to what we've been reading and Picks and Pans and stuff. There's been lots of studies that show almost every cell in your body replaces itself in 7 years. Mm-hmm. So you are literally a different, physically speaking, you are a different person than you were 7 years ago. Every cell in your body has replicated and replaced itself within the last 7 years. So as for that memory, technically, it's not the actual same memory that it was if it was more than 7 years ago. Furthermore, there's a current study out that seems to think that every time you access a memory, you actually change it because, there's no way to, just the law of how things work physically in the universe, you can't, access a memory without technically having some kind of effect to it. Like, it's physically impossible. So that's why a lot of people are like, well, yeah, memory is kind of fucked up because every time you keep thinking about it, you're changing it one way or the other. It may be very small, it may be very minute. You may be putting more of a happy spin on it. You may be putting more of a, sad spin on it, depending. So, just kind of going back to the whole thing about not being able to trust memory. So, now that I've brought everyone down. All right. Well,
that's why Albus Dumbledore has that panseer, so he can just go.
Yeah, there you go.
The memory in, and it's. Should all have
and
one.
People wonder why we are skeptical of things that were written a long time ago or based on memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once again, thank God for written word / printing presses / the internet. All right. We're gonna continue the horrible future train by our next book, and that is The Handmaid's Tale, which ironically we figured out before the show started was written in 1985 by Margaret Atwood, so a Canadian author. Yay!
And
so I'm hoping I can. No, is it an ongoing series that's on Hulu, or do y'all know? Because I'm thinking this may be one I try to go ahead and read the book and then go ahead and watch the show.
I'm not sure if this is a limited release or if it's the first season.
Okay.
I would imagine as popular as it's been, though, it'll keep going.
I don't remember it being that big of books. I don't know how much they can do with it.
Well, they may try to add a bunch of stuff to it, so
maybe. Yeah.
Which would be interesting, especially if if
Hollywood
I read it and
would
watch
never.
it. Do what?
Hollywood would never.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, All right, well, let's move on. What else have you been reading? Chris, have you had a chance to read anything else over the last month?
No, because I've been trying to get through this book because it was really hard to get into and get motivated to read it. And we've been doing a lot of stuff around outside the house, so it's also been I've been too tired.
Yeah. Well,
to read anything up.
When the weather's nice.
Yeah. When it's nice, I'm outside. So
gotcha. What about you, Jennifer? Have you been reading anything?
I started reading The Phantom of the Opera after this one.
Really?
But I haven't finished. This is, the first time through it. I saw the play last month and 30, so hopefully it helps, answer some questions.
Okay, cool.
Or confuse me more because they changed it,
Exactly. You're like, wait, that wasn't in the thing. So.
Shit. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I actually did not take, I didn't take the continuous notes like I normally do, for the previous books. So I actually got 2 other books read. I actually finished the second one literally, maybe an hour before we started recording. I managed to read the 4th book in the Magic 2.0 series, Fight and Flight. It's by Scott Meyer. I love this series. Basically, it's just the ongoing adventures of a group of guys and gals that are all programmers, hackers/programmers, that throughout different points in history find this hidden file that's basically it controls the universe. It controls the world. And so they start figuring out by going in and altering little things in this file, they can do certain things. And they all end up screwing themselves over and have to go back to, they all kind of get the same idea of, well, I can manipulate, the physical universe. Is there a time and place I could do that where it wouldn't seem out of sync? Oh, I know. I'll go back to England and become a wizard. And that's literally what it's about. But it's very lighthearted. One of the first things they say is, rule number 1 is don't make the obvious joke about your wand or your staff. As to it says. So like I said, it's very lighthearted. It's very funny. I really am enjoying it. The other book that I actually just finished tonight is Unholy Ghost. It's apparently the first book in the Downside Ghost series by Stacia Kane. It was interesting. It was all right. It basically is this idea that at some point during time, literally all of these ghosts come up and just start killing people, and the church basically drops their idea that they're in servitude to God. They're actually here as protectors of the world, and start enlisting people to learn magic to seal away these ghosts or whatever. When of course the main character, she has some other stuff going on, she's addicted to drugs and this, that, and the other. So there's some other stuff in there. It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea, an interesting take on the idea of using magic and ghost and stuff like that. It just didn't have enough of it in there for me. A lot of it was kind of like this. She gets in trouble with her drug dealer, and then this opposing group, and there's kind of a mystery that she's trying to figure out, and there just wasn't as much of the spiritual or as in ghost and exorcising stuff in there that I was hoping for. So because you really only kind of get it really, really super bookend at the beginning and at the very end, and I was just like, all right, are we gonna get back to this, or what's going on? So but it was okay. So I don't know if I'll pick up any more in the series. If I get a bunch of credits stacked up, maybe I will. But right now I'm okay. I'm actually trying to figure out what the next thing I'm gonna rate is. So besides our next book, that is. So that is it, our show for the week, or for the month, ladies and gentlemen. If you would, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play, wherever you might listen to the show. We also record the show once a month live on YouTube. So if you ever want to jump in there and share your thoughts, you're more than welcome to. You can, of course, find the show on epicallygeeky.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at epicallygeeky. And then you can also check out some of the other shows that we have on there. The Epically Geeky show, Epically Geeky Makers, Epic Rhythm and Brews, We got lots of shows, lots of stuff to check out. So, if you're looking for something to listen to, come find us. So, where can we find you on the internet? Chris?
On Instagram at The Lake Life.
Did you drop the periods or is it all together?
No, I didn't, but I sound ridiculous when I say it. So
it's
it's the dot lake.
I kind of like it. Jennifer, where can we find you online?
Instagram and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me.
I'm sorry, I still love that. I think I've always meant to ask you, how did you come up with that? Did you just like...
Let me tell you, it was a struggle because when I got Instagram and Twitter, I was late on the bus and I wanted something super clever. And everybody calls me Hetz or Hetzel or, whatever. So I'm like, well, I got to make a play on my name. So
nice.
I went through several iterations of song lyrics and stupid quotes. And somehow I just managed that one. And I was like, it's perfect. It's cheesy boy band, 90s and early yachts, whatever. So, yeah, I went with it. And now that it's May, I have to celebrate that every year on social media.
Yes, besides the copious amounts of pizza posts I see on your social feeds. So.
I'm a very what's the word? Mysterious person. It's hard to figure me out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can follow my individual wacky adventure online at Optimus Gene on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. For everyone on the site, have a good night.